Why did 50 Cent, The Game, and Drake all turn on Kendrick Lamar at the exact same time? The answer is uncomfortable, but 50 just exposed it. While promoting his Diddy documentary, he made a statement defending Drake that reveals the one thing these rappers can't forgive Kendrick for. It's not about the beef. It's not about Not Like Us. It's about something Kendrick did that proves everything they sacrificed to get famous was unnecessary. And now they're watching him headline the Super Bowl, sell out stadiums, and become the king of hip-hop without making the same deal they made. The jealousy is eating them alive, and you can hear it in every word 50 says. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe, because we're witnessing in real time a dividing line in rap. So many different MCs from various eras and corners of hip-hop are livid about the success Kendrick Lamar is experiencing and are hating on him in the most pathetic ways. Please make sure to leave a like before we continue, because it's important to recognize how Kendrick Lamar drives these rappers mad in a way that, in my estimation, we've never seen before. No one who has held a crown in hip-hop has made legends and people within the game more upset overall. When you discover why, and when you see how 50 Cent defended Drake here, you realize so much more than we ever knew, far more than we originally expected when this entire beef started. Honestly, with the way 50 Cent talked about Drake, it's pretty much confirmed that 50 was directly coaching Drake on how to go against Kendrick Lamar and helped him try to sabotage Kendrick's career as a whole. Before we dive deeper into that, let's examine what 50 Cent directly said and how he said it. While I can't show the clip of this interview, it took place between 50 and Ari Melber, who you may have seen on the news frequently referencing and quoting hip-hop. He's an absolutely huge hip-hop fan and loves to speak with rappers whenever he can. As 50 Cent conducts his press tour for his new documentary on the downfall of Diddy, which is a whole other topic we don't have time to discuss today, he was interviewed by someone who is a genuine hip-hop fan and isn't just there to discuss the most salacious details surrounding Diddy. Melber apparently asked him questions about what's happening in the larger rap landscape. Of course, the biggest story in hip-hop for the last year or two has been Kendrick versus Drake and all the aftermath that followed. That's exactly what he spoke to 50 about. What he questioned 50 with was a simple but important statement to pose to someone who held a crucial position in hip-hop years ago. Was the Kendrick and Drake beef ultimately good for hip-hop, or was it mixed? Here's what 50 Cent said. We have the quote, so let's read it. I think it's great for hip-hop, and there's a competitive nature there. You got to compete for the #1 slot. Even when you're at the top, you got a hit record. There's still 10 people there. We don't know who the best one is. That part seems reasonable. It really feels like he's speaking to the rules of hip-hop and the fundamental understanding of the game in a certain way. But here's where things get strange, and where the entire context of everything changes. Drake is in a position where he's delivered so much consistently that the audience is resisting his material. It's not a bad song. It's just they are deciding not to receive it the same way because of the climate. Once again, we're seeing a rapper, and one who was even bigger than Drake in his prime, one of the biggest and most dominant rappers for a few years that we've ever seen, speak out. Honestly, you could expand that statement beyond hip-hop and say he was one of the biggest in all of music, despite the status that 50 once held, and despite him being one of the most competitive rappers of all time who would have never defended himself like this, who would have found any way to win a back and forth, which is why he's sitting here with this whole Diddy situation, why he's doing all of this now and even in a position to speak. Even with all of that, we see 50 contradict what he always stood for during the prime of his rap career. Instead, he's making this weak excuse for Drake, trying to explain away why Drake hasn't been doing well this past year, and why he lost the beef as a whole. There's a lot to unpack here in terms of how he's trying to diminish the loss that Drake took and make it sound like it was something derived from the system and the climate in hip-hop, rather than simply one rapper being better, smarter, and doing everything greater than the other. I think it's so disappointing. After seeing 50 run with this narrative that so many other older and younger rappers have tried to use to defend Drake, as if it's their job or as if everything depends on it, I really need to address this because it's absolutely baffling. It shows the state of hip-hop and reveals how much the culture has lost the plot, how people have been consumed by industry games and picking their favorites instead of actually pushing for the truth and standing on the rules and merit of the culture. Every single person who gets to speak on this level has benefited from that culture, and they should honor what it's always stood for, and how you've always needed to follow it. Whether it's been Young Thug, 21 Savage, The Game, 50 Cent here, and there have been so many others. You could put Lil Baby on that list. You could even put J. Cole on that list. You could really go on about all these guys who have sneak dissed Kendrick and try to diminish what he's done in some way. It's all just so strange. I almost want to give 50 Cent a little credit because at least in this interview, he says it with a smile on his face and acts like he believes it, which I guess is the manipulator and tactician in him. When all these other guys do it, they look down, they get all insecure looking, and they just seem like they're having a temper tantrum. Kind of like the way Ish on the Joe Budden podcast gets when he's checked, for those who are fans of that show. To get to the point of why it's so disappointing to see 50 Cent talk like this, even though we know he's been Team Drake. And honestly, he really may have been Drake's closest ally throughout this entire beef from when like that dropped all the way until now. It's because you're sitting here to all of our faces, and it's never just that Kendrick Lamar got a win in this beef, but maybe Drake is better overall. I don't agree with that, and I don't think most rap fans do. But if you wanted to say that, it's at least a more respectable stance and acknowledges the clear fact that Kendrick Lamar won the rapping and lyrical competition. But it's not even that. What is so baffling, and what really shows how upset everybody is about Kendrick's success, and if it were the other way around, I'm sure they wouldn't stop talking about how great Drake is. Well, it all comes down to the way they try to cope and justify the fact that Kendrick won. It's all centered around this idea of some shadow presence, industry games, and clear manipulation and tricks that were played, which is ultimately just supposed to be a diversion from the fact that Kendrick was better. If we just look at the quote 50 said, when you examine what he says about Drake, he justifies Drake losing and Kendrick getting the win by framing it as a convenience, a moment that was all set up against him. He explains Drake losing and the outcome of this beef by saying, Drake is in a position where he's delivered so much consistently that the audience is resisting his material. That's one of the worst arguments I've ever heard, and one of the saddest ways to try to cope with the fact that you've lost, you're out of options, and you're creatively bankrupt. Even in hip-hop itself, rappers have shown that in terms of being superstars and being some of the faces of not just the hip-hop industry, but the music industry, you can dominate commercially, critically, and culturally for as long as you want. When I think about the greats in hip-hop who have dominated for a long time and consider if their material was ever resisted like 50 Cent is referring to, the only time it's actually been resisted and listeners haven't been able to accept it or weren't ready for it, when it's not bad music, is when someone like Eminem or Jay-Z, who were absolute superstars, or even 50 Cent, released albums that were just mediocre or bad. People resisted that. But aside from releasing bad music, unless somebody like Kanye was releasing Yeezus or Kendrick was releasing Mr. Morale, fans don't resist great music unless it's ahead of its time and so experimental that people aren't ready to fathom what they're hearing and trying to process. To bring that back to Drake, when I'm talking about Mr. Morale and Yeezus, those are real albums from superstars that people resisted in terms of being the mainstream statements that their other albums were. Drake is not releasing an album that is even slightly risky, slightly experimental, or doing anything that's slightly different. So to sit here and try to say that people didn't enjoy the I'm in Singles or Oasis, or even the tracks during the beef because he has delivered so consistently that the audience is resisting his material, that is a lie. That is a sheer and bold-faced lie. The claim makes absolutely no sense because what Drake has done is not consistently great. He has consistently delivered the same exact type of music, which you could call the Marvel movie of rap. He wasn't breaking the mold, and you kind of knew exactly what you were getting. You knew the exact box he was going to play in, whether it was pop rap, pop R&B, or whatever in between that he was borrowing from. It was always so safe and derivative of what was a norm and what everybody else was doing. It was so easily acceptable. Honestly, the closest comparison I could make is somebody like Future, who around the same time and in the same era as Drake has consistently done high numbers by releasing music that sonically and aesthetically has pretty much been the same thing. Nobody has rejected him, and he is always at big hits pretty much every time he stepped out with a project or within a major era in his career. You know why people haven't rejected Future but have rejected Drake? Because one's music has gotten exponentially worse, while the other has hovered around the same bar quality that they've delivered for a long time in their career. I say all that to say I am absolutely tired of dancing around the point when it comes to a lot of these big players in hip-hop. Kendrick Lamar beat Drake fair and square. He outsmarted him in every corner, and Drake could have, in a vacuum, done the exact same thing and won the beef. But he simply did not take the proper steps to outwork Kendrick Lamar in a lyrical back and forth, and within this rap chess game where so much was on the line. That's really what's so frustrating, because it's so obvious now that Kendrick versus Drake was the biggest rap beef of all time, and honestly maybe the biggest moment in the entertainment industry, at least of the 2020s decade so far. To understand the stakes of it all on the scale, and then to try and say that the guy who ended up winning only won on a technicality. It's just so disingenuous. Honestly, whether you say you're hip-hop or not, it is one of the most anti-hip-hop things you could do, because it puts a bad stain on the culture in terms of what you're saying really represents it. You're deprioritizing the biggest rap moment away from the art, and away from the things that actually made it as compelling and as legendary as it was. You're trying to say that some tricks were pulled, or there was some weird fatigue that people had for Drake, which is why Not Like Us became arguably the biggest rap song of the entire century. It's honestly very funny because as the game has also been dissing and taunting Kendrick Lamar recently, and now 50 Cent is as well. Whatever their differences have always been, the game and 50 do seem to be on the same page ideologically in terms of their disdain for Kendrick Lamar. Both of them had good relationships with Kendrick Lamar leading up to this beef, and leading up to when Kendrick became the undisputed king of the genre, and did things that no other rapper ever did, whether it's the Super Bowl or the stadium tour. What it seems like is that after this moment where Kendrick took down Drake, the guy they all loved or all thought was untouchable, and then achieved those milestones which went higher than any rapper has ever gone, they all of a sudden turn on him. Try to attribute his success to industry games and tricks, and have started to defend Drake way more than they ever have. I think with 50 Cent and his disdain and strange beef with Kendrick Lamar, it does mirror the games in a lot of ways. I believe it all comes from the same principle and notion that if Kendrick Lamar was the number 3 guy, the number 7 guy, the number 15 guy in rap, or even the number 2 guy, they were okay with his position and success. But now that somebody like him has become number 1, they can't handle it. The reason why this really seems to be the case, and I think it makes more and more sense the more we see people talk about him, is because for Kendrick Lamar, it's not what he's doing, but it's about how he did it and how he got there in the first place. What I mean by this is that from Drake to pretty much every other rapper and every other artist in the history of the music industry, when you get within a label and you're trying to chase superstardom and become the biggest name you could possibly be, it often requires compromising your own values and morals, selling out and doing absolutely ridiculous stuff that does not embody who you are and that compromises your core values, and maybe even why you got into this industry and career in the first place, all to try and chase something that, when you do it the wrong way, will turn you into the worst and most superficial version of yourself, which is exactly how Drake ended up getting what he got. When you look at the music industry, even when you think about the things Drake has had to do to try and retain the spot he once held, which featured him stealing and copying from every corner of music, using as many people as possible to make these big albums where he was encompassing so many different things to try and appeal to as many people as possible. We saw all the other ridiculous things Drake did, which simultaneously had him trying to move like a Taylor Swift adjacent figure, but then also as this huge tough guy and bad guy at the same time. After Drake, and 50 Cent was once the biggest rapper in the world at one point. He knows what it took to reach that level and the things that he had to do. With how everywhere 50 Cent was during his prime, which you could argue made him the biggest rapper for a few years at one point. With all that, and also with the image that the industry tried to portray. I mean, you could listen to 50's first album and see that despite it obviously having massive mainstream appeal, it is still very unapologetically him. Even on The Massacre, you see how the industry was forcing him to kind of exaggerate his characteristics a little more and really focus on creating certain types of music that, when you water them down and make them for the sole purpose of commercial appeal, really do water themselves down and become some of the most superficial things you can produce in this space. I say all of that to say when you see what 50 and what Drake had to do to get on top, and you see the absolutely ridiculous songs they had to make over the years, and the absolutely ridiculous things they had to do, and then you compare to Kendrick Lamar, who got to play Madison Square Garden in the Super Bowl. I mean, while I could say so much else, I think that really does encapsulate a lot of the divide and a lot of the reasons why so many of these people who have been used and corrupted by The industry just hate him. If I had to break it down a little further, it all comes down to the fact that despite being the biggest rapper in the world and despite taking hip-hop to places that nobody ever did, Kendrick Lamar has never had to make anthems like Drake and 50 were forced to, and like so many other stars in this industry have needed to. He has been able to literally become a more free artist who can create anything he wants and go in any direction at any time. When you see that, and even see the image that Kendrick has been able to portray and pushes the face of rap compared to 50 and Drake, who are both pushed to be these tough guys, and then also these guys who were always in the club. And that was pretty much the peak of their personality in terms of what the industry wanted to push them as, which was just for the girls to like and for the guys to feel tough. When you see that and then see how complex and multifaceted Kendrick Lamar has been able to be while climbing higher and higher within this field, you understand why the jealousy is there. Because it all starts to become very obvious and very apparent. It's honestly just surreal when you think about it and see how deep this all runs. Honestly, when people try to make up all these fake stats to try and hype up Drake and act like he is so great, to me, when you see how jealous all these people who pretty much sold out to the industry are that Kendrick Lamar has done more than them, is bigger than them, and hold a higher place on a ladder than them, and yet he is still the same guy he was when they met him in the early 2010s. That drives them absolutely mad. They really, really don't like that. When I hear 50 Cent, or when I hear Joe and his talking, or when I hear Drake, Lil Baby, Young Thug, or even Jay, Cole, and a lot of others, this is why they're so mad at Kendrick. This is why they continue and will continue to put mud on his name. It's all because of how he did it. Honestly, when I think about the position Kendrick Lamar holds as the leader of hip-hop and see how all of these people perceive what he is doing and how people constantly try to coach his career and tell him what to do, this is why I think with Kendrick Lamar, there is really nobody who can tell him what to do but himself in terms of the direction to go forward with in his career. I say that because he has been able to climb higher than anybody else while following his own path. Even when you think about the rises that Drake and 50 had, the bigger and bigger they got, they almost became pop stars. And with that, the actual hip-hop principles that built them were diluted. They became more adjacent to a Taylor Swift or a Beyonce, however you want to frame it. That may in itself be the reason why Kendrick Lamar has been able to get hip-hop to a point that really nobody has ever gotten close to, maybe besides Kanye West and Eminem in terms of catapulting the genre to stages we've never seen. When you think about the way Kendrick has carried hip-hop's principles and brought them to these places where it's got more exposure, and people haven't seen the watered-down version of hip-hop, they've actually seen the real thing and its real principles created, pushed forward, and instilled in these places that everybody freaked out that he even got to. That's why 50 Cent and all these other guys will continue to try and cope and defend Drake. It's because when they see Drake, they ultimately see a version of themselves that just played the industry games the best and climbed the highest they could have if they just continue to sell out and compromise every single thing that ever made them who they are. I say all that to say that with 50 Cent, no matter how much a legend some of his earlier stuff made him, and no matter how funny and honestly good it is that he is exposing people like Diddy, because somebody should be calling this out, and even with him being from hip-hop, I still have to give him credit as being one of the few rappers, and especially superstars at that, whether he's doing it for the right or wrong reasons, to just say that this is not right. With that said, when you speak on the current guy who is taking everything that you're supposed to love and pushing it forward to the highest place we have ever seen, and with your support, who knows maybe where rap could be, it's honestly just shameful and sad that so many of these guys continue to disrespect Kendrick. But honestly, as Kendrick Lamar told us on Count Me Out, the hate gets real or the love gets fake, but when you're this great, that's how it should be. So with all that said, let me know, what do you think about 50 Cent speaking about Kendrick Lamar like this? What is this exposing about the music industry? And what do you think the totality of this is all ultimately going to ensure? Now listen, if you made it to this point in the video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. It helps me out a ton. And if you want to see how, right before this, just before 50 Cent was hating on Kendrick, the game was hating on Kendrick. Not just in interviews originally like we saw 50 here, but the game made an entire album where it's not one, not two, not three, not four, but 5 entire songs where he is talking about and dissing Kendrick Lamar. And with it, I think we very well may get a Kendrick Lamar response very soon. You're not going to want to miss this one. So check out the suggested video.